Minimum of movement for maximum effect. That's what Tommy had in his bowling. Minimum of movement for maximum effect. You don't have to swipe to play real well. You can play it well with 2 or 3 inches, or you can play with 8 inches if you want. They call it minimum of movement for maximum effect, and that's how to control a fiddle. Because if you don't put manners in that, machine, it'll put manners on you. Not right, Siobhan?
Correct.
Yeah. But he had a great volume and crispness in his bowing too. A loud player, you know, in the nicest possible way.
Was he an exotic creature as a fiddle player?
Yeah, he was. He was, like, again, you know, I mean, just that wonderful flick he had on the bow, like nobody else did that. I've never heard it since or before. So, and he had that ability to be able to put that flick into the middle of a tune, like, just so therefore the tune would kind of jump, just slightly off, but it never came off the tracks, but it would jump on the tracks. And so that was extraordinary, and it would always take you by surprise. You knew he had this thing, you knew he was doing this, but every time he did it, he surprised you by doing it because you didn't think it was going to be there. So there was that sort of sense of the unpredictability about his playing, you know.
He kind of digs into the first note of the triplet, and then he aims then to try and get the other 3 on different bows or whatever it is. But I mean, it's a work of art, really.
So like the triplets, I would have tried the triplets for days and weeks and months, and I was going, Dad, will you just tell me what is the story like? So he's going to just snap and release, snap and release. So the finger flying up was when the energy kind of left, when the snap finished, his fingers would go up, mine go down. A small little thing like that he'd say to you that would just kind of explain an awful lot. But he wouldn't sit with you and go over it, you know what I mean? So again, the triplet, you know, I remember playing with him in Lister Varna one night, and this woman came up with me. I was asking about, do you flick your finger when you're doing that? And I remember him trying to explain it a couple of times, and it's like explaining the inner workings of a car under the bonnet when they know how to fill the petrol. And he knew he could be there for a week, and it still wouldn't make sense. So this woman came up to him and said, oh, and it's a flick, don't you? You hit it with your finger. And he goes, yeah. And off she went happy enough, she was happy with that. And I turned around to him and goes, why did you say that to her? And he goes, it's just easier.
I may get at times close or fairly close to a triplet that Tommy would play, but it wouldn't be a Tommy Peoples triplet. His will always be different. There's even the very rhythm of the triplet itself would be different to mine. Totally unique, almost indescribable. But what I did like about it was the bite in the triplet, and yet the tone came through. But there was bite as well, and again there was sweetness and depth, and yet bite, and that's quite some combination. His bowling would have been very, very smooth. There would have been no such thing as an arm going here or there. I think everything happened from, I think the smallest part that could be moved was moved, and I suppose if you put it down to pure physics, it's easier to move something smaller, and something smaller will move. You can move it more smoothly than I think most of it happened below the wrist. Yeah.
What was happening with the right hand?
Again, it always took someone else to point out something to me before I kind of went, oh yeah. So in Glencullen one year, I was having a tune with Dermot McLaughlin in a house, and more than Dermot, but it was Dermot said it to me. He goes, you and your dad use these lovely long bows, like, and you know, Dermot's quite the opposite. So I started to kind of observe that, and then like Dad could put 7 notes in a bow, like including a roll and a couple of grace notes, and it'd be all going the one direction. So he's very smooth with his bow. Again, I'm talking about when the calmer version of the fiddler started to emerge. So that the kind of, you hear a lot of people talk about the explosive 70s and when he was young, and again it would be temperament, it's age. We know ourselves as musicians now, we change and evolve. And I think by the time I got to observation, when it came to Dad, he had mellowed a lot, and maybe playing with the Kilfenoras as much as he did, because he didn't really travel a lot when we were younger. He played a lot locally. He probably had to calm that down to fit in with what everyone else was doing, because he was very much a man to make everyone feel on the same level. Like, I never got a class off Dad. Twice, I think. When he might have come home from a good gathering where there might have been drink involved, and he might get you up out of the bed at 2 a.m. and get you to play tunes with him, and he'd say, you should try doing this now, and don't do that with your bow. And I remember him saying, like, separate your bows more. And because, as I said, we were just given instruments, and here's the tunes, play the tunes. There was no real delving into technique. We had an amazing teacher, but he taught all instruments. So he'd say separate the bows, and so I went off trying that, and I remember getting all my jigs separated and coming home from school, and I go, Dad, listen, play the jig. He's going, yeah, it's good. The reels were more difficult, of course, because you can't separate all of those. So I used to watch him when we played on Sunday nights. I was trying to follow patterns, and I got a pattern off, but I tended to repeat it a lot. And he goes, Siobhan, it's very repetitive. And I was going, but I'm doing exactly what you're doing. He goes, no, you're not. So, he'd nearly force you into a scenario where you really had to focus in and learn for yourself, rather than, there it is, read all this, try that, and copy it.
Well, in some of the tunes Tommy would play, I can hear bagpipes, and there would be a certain history around St Johnstone of marching bands and pipe bands and such, and there would be a very large Scottish influence. In fact, our dialect, I suppose they call it Ulster Scots now, but we spoke at him, and I suppose that's an Ulster Scots tongue, or, well, that's what it's called now. We didn't know that's what it was called until recent years. And it didn't concern us one bit either. We just spoke away. But that comes through in the music as well. And often, in his rhythm, there was something about Tommy's hornpipes where you could hear that at the end of a hornpipe you'd have the 3 crotchets. And that was, but Tommy would sometimes put a triplet on the first of those crotchets, that type of thing, on some of his hornpipes, So the sort of Scottish 3 crotchets at the end of a part would come through quite a bit.
He had one definite thing about the way he bowed. Now, as he said, each to their own. Everyone has their own thing. So he had a basic bowing pattern for 4/4, say, down up, down up, down up, down up, and I suppose I'd use it myself now in that I adopted a lot of what he would have said to me and what I learned from listening to him. It's like any family, you learn to think kind of similarly or talk similarly, or music is no different. So if he slurred in an up bow, he would go to an up bow. you know, be it the next one or the one after that, or so he always had his down bow for a beat. He would adjust then. So after a triplet, you're on the back step, you're going the opposite way. So he had a few ways of smoothing that out. So he'd either slur the next two on an up bow, or slur from the end of the triplet into the next note. Things like that again, it would depend on whether he was being wavy with the bow or more separate bows, you know, more percussive.
They held the bow very lightly. He'd have a different bow grip to me. Well, I've seen him use a few different bow grips over the years. I've seen him grip the bow with the frog and grip it up the stick and so on and so forth. I've seen a couple of different bow grips that he's used. But I would dare to say that his fingers were as active on the bow as they were on the fiddle. And I would say he would have been shifting balance quite a bit, using the fingers from time to time.
And even the fieriness of him in his 20s or, you know, his late teens, that just came from him. That was his voice. Like you said, was this the pen and this the typewriter? Who he was at any given time was what you heard. Like his music was so honest that way. He didn't sit down and say, oh, that sounds nice, I'll put that there. Or, you know, if he was recording an album, he'd practice for weeks. But there was no such thing as putting together the variations or, oh God, I must remember now to put that in. It would be whatever came out on the day. So he could have recorded the High Part of the Road every year for 10 years and it would have been different the 10 times, you know.